stand here in recognition of the fact that you stand above and beyond everything. Praise you that at your name, Lord of Lords, King of Kings, Lord, that we can sing your praises together in this room, these people, Lord, but not just that. People from the ends of the earth, today and always, are singing your praises. And even the earth itself and this universe that we know, it's all shining the spotlight on you, Lord. It's all singing the glorious praises of your name. And so we're here to celebrate you and recognize you, Lord. How amazing you are, Lord. And I pray that we would see and know and feel that it is true this morning and always. Praise his precious name. Amen. You may be seated. Okay, we're going to go ahead and let the little ones go. I can go here. So we'll dismiss those little ones to Children's Church. There I am. And the rest of us, we can open our Bibles to Matthew chapter 8, please. I always love the roar of the children kind of descending down to the basement. So as we get into Matthew 8, we're getting into a transition that I want us to see and understand here. And that's, first of all, last week we finished the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus had taken his disciples aside. More likely than not, this is more than just the 12. But he took them aside to teach them this significant passage in which Jesus teaches in a way that his authority is more than abundantly clear to the people that are hearing him. And if you'll remember, last week we ended with these words at the end of chapter 7, verse 28 and 29. It says, when Jesus had finished saying all these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. So you'll remember, Jesus is saying things like, the law is not gonna pass away because I've come to fulfill the law. I'm going to do that. And you've heard that it was said through the traditions of the Pharisees and even the law itself. You've heard it was said, but I say to you, something greater and more authoritative, right? And he ends here toward the end of chapter 7, many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, have I not done great things in your name? But I will say I never did you. So hearing this, it would have been unmistakable what Jesus was saying about who he is and the kind of authority he has. Well, not only are they going to hear these authoritative words, that's the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' authoritative teaching, but now in chapter 8 and 9, they're going to see the demonstration of Jesus' authority as he does amazing things in people's lives and otherwise. All right, so as chapter 7, the sermon ends with the crowds being amazed because of his authority. At the end of chapter 9, it's going to end the same way. I'm giving you the preview of where this is leading. So at the end of chapter 9, verse 33, it says, and when the demon was driven out, the man who had been mute spoke, and the crowd was amazed and said, nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel. So whether Jesus is teaching or whether he's doing amazing things in people's lives, either way, the crowds are amazed at this man who has a unique authority. He's not like the teachers of the law. He is someone else, and he is doing something else. And as we get into chapter 8, we're going to see what that is and what that means. So What is Jesus then going to demonstrate about his authority? Well, lots of things, as we're going to see in the next few chapters, but it all kind of boils down to this. Jesus is going to demonstrate that with the arrival of his kingdom, he's the king, with his arrival, all of the regression and the brokenness of mankind and this world through the fall, everything that has been falling apart is about to come together and be made new. That's what he's doing here. His arrival means there's not regression of everything. It's not falling apart now. Now that he's here, it's all coming together here. There's going to be progress. Things are coming together and being made whole now because of Jesus. It all centers on and focuses on him, his arrival, his presence. And so to make that known, everything he's going to do is going to demonstrate something about who he is and the work that he's up to, not just in that moment in time, but the work that he's up to in partnership with the Father for all time. So in that end, in the next few chapters, we're going to see Jesus having authority over diseases and incurable illness. And he's going to have control over the forces of nature and the supernatural forces of evil, and even over the lives of his disciples and how they are supposed to follow him. In every way, we're going to see Jesus' authority at work right there and right then. But even in the moment, it's going to point to something bigger and greater. So let's read this passage, because the passage we're reading, 8, 1 through 17, is going to start with Jesus working in a moment in somebody's life, but it's going to end showing us this bigger picture that it's all meant for. And listen, as we read, I hope that you'll feel a little bit what these people that come in touch with Jesus are feeling. Because what's going on in their lives as they come to Jesus is brokenness. It's regression. Do you feel like your life is in regression in one way or another? Sometimes I'll complain to certain people that are older than me. I won't name names, but I'll complain about, after playing basketball with these young guys on Thursday night, man, my knees and my ankles are just sore. I just hurt, and I don't remember things as well as I used to. And I've had more than one older person tell me, well, you don't even know the half of it, buddy, right? You just wait. So I won't tell you who said that. But I don't have to convince older people that, life feels like a regression. It feels often like things are fading, not coming to life, right? And even you younger people, you younger guys that make fun of me for kind of feeling broken and messed up after playing ball. But listen, even you younger people, even if you're not feeling the regression of life, you see it, don't you? Right? So even you teenagers, listen, when you were 5 or 7 or whatever, life was just a breeze, right? But now that you're 15, 17, whatever, you're feeling anxiety now, right? You feel the pressure of life. You see people that are dealing with struggles, and you're starting to feel that yourself, right? Mental health, anxiety about the future, maybe some physical illness that you've had, COVID or otherwise, or whatever it may be, but we're all getting the point that, wow, I'm feeling or seeing regression in my life, and it's painful. I don't want it, but it's real. I don't always know what Jesus is going to do about that or what the point of it even is, but you know it. You know that feeling. And so these people do, and let's look at what Jesus does in their life. So Matthew 8, verse 1. When he came down from the mountainside, from his Sermon on the Mount, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." Immediately he was cured of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, "See that you don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the gift Moses commanded as a testimony to them." Verse 5, when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, asking for help. "Lord," he said, "my servant lies at home paralyzed and in terrible suffering." Regression, right? Jesus said to him, "I will go and heal him." The centurion replied, "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and that one, 'Come,' and he comes. I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was astonished and said to those following him, "I tell you the truth, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Then Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, it will be done just as you believed it would." And his servant was healed at that very hour. Verse 14, when Jesus came into Peter's house, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she got up and began to wait on him. So 3 instances where Jesus acts in a moment of time powerfully and immediately, and now we back up and see the bigger picture. When evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him, and he drove out the spirits with a word. Wow. And healed all the sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities and carried our diseases. Now, we're going to kind of start and end with that right there, the idea of this prophecy that was fulfilled and what Jesus was doing right there and then. And what I want to encourage you with this morning is that what Jesus is up to, not just in this moment in your life, he's up to something, but in the big picture, it is a blossoming of the fulfillment of God's healing work in our lives. And how I'd like you to think about that or even see it here is, I got these flowers on stage. I don't know if you can see them. I was hoping for bigger flowers to show you, but think about the way that a flower grows and blossoms into the full beauty of what it will end up being. And let's start with this prophetic word. Remember, Isaiah said in Isaiah 53, look at these words with me. What's being quoted here is Isaiah 53. "Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed." So Isaiah spoke those words some 600 years before Jesus shows up. And so in some sense, there's this promise, this budding of a reality that the people in Isaiah's day, they don't understand fully what's about to happen. All they know is that this is true. God has said it through Isaiah, and healing is coming. Somebody is coming to do a work, an unparalleled work of healing in their lives. And so in some sense, in Isaiah, you have this budding flower. You probably can't see this, but I can see the flower petals. I can see the color of it, barely, but it's there. It's starting to bloom, but not even close to full yet. Right? And then you have these words of Isaiah being repeated now in Jesus' ministry as he's touching people and he's literally healing them of their physical illnesses. And this shows up again. This prophecy that you and I already know. There's something more to this, but what's true now is that Jesus is physically healing people. in a miraculous way to show them his authority over all things. And this truth about what Jesus is doing is blossoming even more. So now I can see the petals starting to bloom and the more of the color and the fullness of God's promise, right? But of course we know there's more to this than what's even happening in Matthew 8. Because later on in 1 Peter, we're going to see that 1 Peter, he says, he himself bore our sins, our infirmities, in his body on the tree, so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness, for by his wounds you have been healed. So Isaiah 53 shows up again. We go from the arrival of the kingdom in Matthew to now a cross where Jesus is doing a healing work that's more than just a miraculous physical healing, right? His healing now is on a cross, which involves our hearts and everything about us. He's not just dealing with our bodies, but he's dealing with the sin that has broken everything in the first place. So in that sense, it's coming even more to fruition, right? This promise is becoming more full and more beautiful than we ever imagined. And isn't it interesting that back as Jesus is healing the effects of the fall, right, which are far and broad, it affects everything, right? People, creation, everything. But if you'll remember, what were the consequences, the two listed for human beings back in Genesis 3 after the fall? Pain and labor and toil taking care of the ground, right? Two very physical things that were consequences. And now we see in Matthew 8, people's physical bodies being healed. And in 1 Peter, he's reflecting on what Jesus did on the cross, and something more than physical is happening. But the very root cause of sin is being dealt with. But it's not the full picture yet, is it? There's something even more. Because in Revelation, I'm just going to read this to you. You don't have to turn there. But in Revelation 21, it says this. Just picture this. Picture there's a tree of life. Just like there was a tree of life in the garden, there's a tree of life in heaven. And it says the leaves of the tree of life will be for the healing of the nations. And it says this in Revelation 21, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. That's past tense. And there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no death, no mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Now, why did I go through all that big, broad, sweeping picture of Scripture? Well, because this is critical. It's critical for us to appreciate what Jesus is doing in this moment with these people. These people come to Jesus, and at a moment in time, in their great pain, feel like their life is just regressing and fading away, he does something amazing and miraculous. And it changes the course of their earthly life in a very powerful way. But at the very same time he's doing that in that moment, he is showing them something that is far greater and better. He's showing them that that healing in that moment, it's just a budding flower. It's beautiful. I can appreciate it, but there's more coming. There's more. And it's far greater than what I'm doing for you now, even though it feels like what I'm doing now is the greatest thing I could ever do for you. No. There's something way better, because a cross is coming, and a new heaven and a new earth is coming, and everything is blossoming. And so that truth that was true for them in Matthew 8 is true for us now. So let's go back through the text and see how that hope happens, how Jesus works immediately with their physical condition, but how he also deals with the diagnosis of their life. He shows them that this is not regression, that my healing work is progressing. There's a process here that I am inviting you to be a part of. And you can do it by living under the authority and the care and the treatment of this great physician who is only moving us toward full recovery. Do you know that's true in your life right now? Jesus, whatever he is doing or whatever it seems he isn't doing, he's moving you toward full recovery, toward the beautiful blossoming of his plan for all eternity. What a great and awesome truth. So, we'll see it in the text and we'll see it in our lives. Let's look back now at the life of the leper. So what is Jesus doing right here and right now in the life of this leper? So look at the way he approaches Jesus. So first of all, this man has this deadly and incurable disease, right? Leprosy. There's no way to treat that at that time. And not only that, but it was very isolating for him from the community. His friends, his family would have nothing to do with him. In fact, he wasn't allowed in the temple. He wasn't allowed to participate in worship, and you probably know all that. But think about that. Just think about the sense of regression of life being kind of worthless, maybe falling apart for him. Life's fading away as my body fades away with this disease. But now he comes to Jesus. And how does he come to Jesus? Well, first of all, it says he knelt before him. That word is probably more than just kneeling. It often is translated to prostrate oneself in worship. That's the word that's used, how it's commonly translated. It's somebody who falls down to worship before somebody else, or typically before God himself. So this leper, a life that's fading away, goes to Jesus and falls down on his face before him. And what does he say to Jesus? If you will, I could be made clean. He doesn't say if you can, because it seems like he's just assuming that about the authority of Jesus. Jesus, I know you can heal me right now. That is possible for you. And so if you want to, you can. Isn't that a great faith? Isn't that a great recognition of the authority of Jesus over this disease that man can do nothing about? So, the healing in that moment, Jesus touches him, right? This untouchable is touched by the hand of Jesus, and he's healed right there and then. Just stop and think about how life-changing that would have been for that man right now. I'm not even talking about, when Jesus dies for my sin or when I get to go to heaven. I'm talking about his earthly life right then and there. The whole outlook of his life changes in an instant because of the authority of Jesus and his healing touch on his life. That's phenomenal, isn't it? And yet, even in his own words, the leper, he says, not you can simply heal me, but you can make me clean. Isn't that interesting? Nobody else says that except for a leper, as far as I can remember. You can make me clean. And this is where the bigger picture comes in and what Jesus continues to say. Because Jesus didn't just have in mind leprosy being gone for the man. What does he say to him next? Now, don't say anything to anybody else. Just go and show yourself to the priest, because there's going to have to be some steps for him to take for the priest to acknowledge that he is actually cured of this disease, because that just doesn't happen. So there's going to have to be some investigation and some understanding that he's actually not a leper anymore. And then they're going to have to go through a ritual by which he is able to now come and worship again. And then think of all the many conversations he's going to have with people who think he's a leper. No, I'm not a leper anymore. Pfft, right. No, seriously, I'm really not a leper. Let me show you. Whoa, back up, dude. Right? No, I'm not a leper. Jesus healed me. I mean, think of how many times he's going to have that conversation. So, yeah, there's this process of healing and restoration where this man is going to once again have relationships. He's once again going to be able to worship God with the community of faith. That's a bigger picture that's happening here, right? That's what Jesus is ultimately aiming at. Full restoration of this man into community and worship with God himself. That's pretty awesome, isn't it? That's what Jesus does. That's what his authority can do. What about the centurion? What happens in this moment for the centurion and his hurt servant? So the centurion, in a similar way, comes to Jesus, probably from somewhere further away, probably Syria or somewhere else. But he comes to Jesus, and he, what does he say? As Jesus, he presents his servant who's sick, suffering terribly, and paralyzed in bed. Again, severe regression, right? Where is my life going if I'm paralyzed and suffering in bed? That life's going nowhere, right? But he comes to Jesus. He shares with Jesus what's happening. Jesus, in some ways, asks a question. Do you want me to come with you? Do you want me to travel back to your home in this other land to heal this person? And what does the centurion say? No. I don't even deserve that you would come under my roof. Now, get this, because a centurion, a Roman centurion, would never have thought that some Jewish person would be special or have authority over their lives. They never would have thought that. It doesn't matter if they were a chief priest or anything. They were still a Jew, and this guy's a Roman centurion. But he says, I don't deserve that you would even come under my roof. In fact, all you have to do is say a word, Jesus. If you speak it, I believe it'll happen. That's pretty amazing. And Jesus says Jesus was amazed by it. But for him to see Jesus that way, for this Roman officer to see this Jewish man as having that kind of authority, that he's not only thinking of him as not worthy to be in his home, but that he can simply speak words to heal an incurable disease, a paralytic. He's willing to come up under Jesus' authority that way. And so Jesus does something amazing in that moment in time, right? The servant's healed that very hour. Once again, a radically life-changing thing. Could Jesus do anything greater than that? To heal a paralytic who's miles away, maybe in another country, by just speaking the words. I mean, that in itself, could it get any better? Well, yeah, it can, because Jesus sees a greater picture. He's moving in that moment, but he's doing something bigger. And that's what he goes into here with the faith of this centurion. Jesus says, look, just like this man came from the east and the west, he came from far away because he's not a Jew, right? And he's going to feast with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Listen, if you were a Jew and you were hearing that, you would have thought Jesus was crazy. It's the Jews who are going to be at the feast with the fathers of the Jews, not Gentiles. But Jesus says, no. There's a bigger picture here. This man that you all think is just a Gentile and on the outside, no, he's going to be on the inside because he sees my authority. He lives up under it. And he's part of a bigger work here that I'm doing to bring in not just Jewish people, but Gentiles as well. People from every nation are going to come and feast with me. So, yeah, the servant is healed by a word, but there's a bigger picture here of great faith, maybe even unlikely faith. And so we're appreciating the undeserved presence of Jesus. That's what this man does. He's trusting in his powerful words will come to pass. And this is what gives him a heritage in his kingdom and a place at the table with the Heavenly Father. Powerful testimonies of Jesus at work in people's lives. And here in a couple minutes, I'm going to give you a chance to share a testimony, if you'd like, of Jesus and his greatness in your life in this moment or a recent moment. But I want us to stop and look at one more thing about this statement in Matthew 8:17. He took up our infirmities and he carried our diseases. I want you to feel the weight of Jesus' presence here, because as we talk about this big picture of all that God's doing and all of history and what's going to happen way down the road, I don't want you to be discouraged by that as though nothing's happening in your life now. Because whatever is or isn't happening in your life now, this verse, this matters. He took up our infirmities. He bore or carried our diseases. That literally means Jesus shares in your pain. He takes possession of your pain. He doesn't just look down and say, I'm going to do something about that, don't worry. No. He carries it. That word is beautiful. To take something up with your hand and carry it away. That's what he's got in mind for you. So whatever it is that's happening in your moment, this is true about Jesus in your life. He is sharing your pain with you. He is in it. He's not just pointing you to something that's going to happen in eternity. He's beside you, carrying your illness right now in this moment. So, whatever it is that feels like regression in your life right now, I don't know what that is. Maybe it's bodies and minds that seem to be fading. Maybe it's relationships that have been broken and are falling apart. You're more distant from this person now than maybe you've ever been. I know that doesn't have to deal with physical healing, but listen, this can apply in a range of things, can it? Whatever's happening in your life that seems like regression, listen, you can trust that it cannot spoil or ruin or undermine the progress of God's healing work in your life. You can trust that. You can trust the progress of his healing work, because he's not just giving you a plan, he's standing beside you in whatever's happening in your life. The plan is coming together. The prophetic word is blossoming, but you can trust that he's living with you right now. Whether you're being healed physically or not, that's true. It may be happening one way or another. Let me just illustrate how I've seen this happening in my own life, or at least in the people in my life. So, Alicia and I had some very, very dear friends from Chattanooga who, his wife, I can't even remember what kind of cancer she had, but the cancer she was having, I believe it was breast cancer, was metastasizing. And it was spreading all over her body, and over a period of years, it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And it was to the point where there was nothing they could do about it. There was no more treatment to be had, but they wanted to monitor what was going on with her. Well, through time and through prayer, through trusting what God was up to, after years and years of watching this disease spread, she went to the doctor, and for some reason they were doing a scan, and the scan showed that there was nothing in her body. Whatever cancer there was that had spread all over her body was gone. And as you can imagine, the doctors are amazed, much like the crowds were amazed, because there's zero medical explanation for that. The treatment had stopped, and even if the treatment was ongoing, it would not have done this. There's no way. So all that could happen was a recognition of God's miraculous and authoritative power. That's the only thing that could have been true about this. What an amazing thing, huh? The testimony that they were able to give, not just in that moment, but for the past 20 or 30 years since this happened. The testimony of sharing the goodness and amazing power of God to people. That's pretty spectacular. But of course, The other testimony that's true in my life is that of my mom, who last year went through 4 months of cancer, and she wasn't miraculously healed. God didn't show up in that way to deliver her from cancer. God didn't. But God was still working in that moment. It wasn't a physical healing. But the testimony of my mom in those days when she was dying had nothing to do with, I hope God heals me. I hope he takes the cancer away. Yeah, I mean, she did want that. But her words were much more along the lines of, I'm so ready to see God face to face. I'm just ready, and I'm happy if he takes me home. That's the testimony that rings in my mind because Mom said it over and over and over again. And that is actually what God was doing in that moment in her life. But again, there's a bigger picture to that because now that has affected me and my family and anyone else that heard from my mom or saw my mom in those 4 months. They saw and heard a picture of something bigger because that's what my mom saw. She saw a bigger picture in that moment. She knew that even though cancer was shutting her body down, she saw that her life was actually coming to full bloom. That's the work Jesus was doing. And she fully trusted that he would get it done. So Tabor, I hope that you can be encouraged in this moment right now. Because he may be healing your chronic illness. He may be healing your cancer. That could very well be true because he is able. But even if he's not, you can trust that he's still doing something with you in this moment. He's giving you the gift of faith. He's increasing your strength. He's showing you the community of God's people that are loving you well. Whatever it is he's doing something in your life in this moment. And at the same time, he's showing you something bigger, isn't he? As you stop and reflect on his work, the full-fledged, completed work that will come to pass in each and every one of your lives, you can count on it. It is true and it is certain. And you can live in that reality right now. What a beautiful thing. So before we spend some time in worship, we're going to sing several songs here to close our time. I'd like to ask if we could get, is there one or two people that you'd like to just testify of the greatness of Jesus in your life in this moment? Maybe he's healing you, maybe he's not. But you just like to shine the spotlight on Jesus and what he's doing in your life in this moment. Well, as the worship team comes up, let's just spend a moment praising Jesus, thanking him in your mind. I know that may be hard right now, given whatever situation you're in. But again, we can trust the progress he's making in our lives because of who he is, can't we? Lord Jesus, I want to praise you for the power you have over sin and weakness and illness and everything else in our lives that feels like regression, that feels like things are falling apart. Lord, in our weakest moments, we trust you to help us see how you're bringing it together, or at least trust that you are, even when we can't see it. Lord, your process is sometimes painfully slow, and it's hard. But thank you that you actively take up our infirmities. Your presence is very real and personal and active in our lives. We praise you for that, Jesus. Thank you that your touch is true in our lives. You carry away our diseases. And if not the disease that's riddling our body right now, we do know that you have accomplished and will finish the work of sin and the fall in our lives and in everything. You're going to finish that work. So thank you for what you've already done on the cross to assure our ultimate healing. Thank you that you'll make it to come to pass, Lord. Just give us patient endurance and faith in you in the meantime. we trust that you are able and willing to do just that. Praise things in your precious name. Amen.